In this video, we're going to cover a number of public statements made by the late Pope Francis on the topic of gender ideology. We will follow with references from two important Vatican documents that were released during Pope Francis' time in office, which many Catholics may not be aware of. These are the 2019 document, Male and Female, He Created Them, and the second is the 2024 document, Dignitas Infinita. At the end, we will consider the articles of Canon Law related to Catholic childhood education, articles that are currently being broken in many Catholic schools around the country right now. If you are a Catholic and unfamiliar with any elements of this content, then I would advise you continue with this video to the end and also reference the links in the video description so as to fully inform yourself regarding the Catholic Church's position on this issue. If you are not a Catholic but are still interested in understanding the Catholic position, then please continue as well. In an interview with Italian journalists published in 2015, Pope Francis stated, and I quote, "Let's think of the nuclear arms, of the possibility to annihilate in a few instants a very high number of human beings. Let's think also of genetic manipulation, of the manipulation of life, or of the gender theory that does not recognize the order of creation." In his 2016 address to Poland's bishops, Pope Francis stated the following, and I quote, "I would like to conclude with this aspect, since behind all this there are ideologies. In Europe, America, Latin America, Africa, and in some countries of Asia, there are genuine forms of ideological colonization taking place, and one of these, I will call it clearly by its name, is the ideology of gender. Today children are taught in school that everyone can choose his or her sex. Why are they teaching this? Because the books are provided by the persons and institutions that give you money. These forms of ideological colonization are also supported by influential countries. And this is terrible." In his 2023 interview with the Argentine newspaper La Nación, Pope Francis stated the following, and I quote, "Gender ideology today is one of the most dangerous ideological colonizations. Why is it dangerous? Because it blurs differences and the value of men and women. All humanity is the tension of differences. It is to grow through the tension of differences. The question of gender is diluting the differences and making the world the same, all dull, all alike. And that is contrary to the human vocation." In his March 2024 symposium address, we have the following news article, and I quote, "Pope Francis on Friday again spoke out against gender theory, describing it as an ugly ideology of our time. Because it erases all distinctions between men and women, to cancel this difference is to erase humanity. Man and woman, instead, exist in a fruitful tension," he said. And then in April of 2024, we had the publication of Dignitas Infinita. And again, this was captured in the news at the time. And I quote, "The Vatican on Monday reaffirmed its opposition to gender-affirming surgery, gender theory, in inverted commas, and surrogate parenthood. The 20-page text called gender theory extremely dangerous and accused it of trying to deny the greatest possible difference that exists between living beings, sexual difference. On gender theory, it said, desiring a personal self-determination amounts to a concession to the age-old temptation to make oneself God, entering into competition with the true God of love revealed to us in the Gospel." On the 8th of April 2024, the document Dignitas Infinita was published by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. Gender theory. The Church wishes, first of all, to reaffirm that every person, regardless of sexual orientation, ought to be respected in his or her dignity and treated with consideration, while every sign of unjust discrimination is to be carefully avoided, particularly any form of aggression and violence. For this reason, it should be denounced as contrary to human dignity the fact that, in some places, not a few people are imprisoned, tortured, and even deprived of the good of life solely because of their sexual orientation. At the same time, the Church highlights the definite critical issues present in gender theory. On this point, Pope Francis has reminded us that the path to peace calls for respect for human rights, in accordance with the simple yet clear formulation contained in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, whose 75th anniversary we recently celebrated. These principles are self-evident and commonly accepted. Regrettably, in recent decades, attempts have been made to introduce new rights that are neither fully consistent with those originally defined, nor always acceptable. They have led to instances of ideological colonization in which gender theory plays a central role. The latter is extremely dangerous since it cancels differences in its claim to make everyone equal. Regarding gender theory, whose scientific coherence is the subject of considerable debate among experts, the Church recalls that human life in all its dimensions, both physical and spiritual, is a gift from God. This gift is to be accepted with gratitude and placed at the service of the good. Desiring personal self-determination, as gender theory prescribes, apart from this fundamental truth that human life is a gift, amounts to a concession to the age-old temptation to make oneself God, entering into competition with the true God of love revealed to us in the Gospel. Another prominent aspect of gender theory is that it intends to deny the greatest possible difference that exists between living beings: sexual difference. This foundational difference is not only the greatest imaginable difference, but is also the most beautiful and most powerful of them all. In the male-female couple, this difference achieves the most marvellous of reciprocities. It thus becomes the source of that miracle that never ceases to surprise us, the arrival of new human beings in the world. In this sense, respect for both one's own body and that of others is crucial in light of the proliferation of claims to new rights advanced by gender theory. This ideology envisages a society without sexual differences, thereby eliminating the anthropological basis of the family. It thus becomes unacceptable that some ideologies of this sort, which seek to respond to what are at times understandable aspirations, manage to assert themselves as absolute and unquestionable, even dictating how children should be raised. It needs to be emphasized that biological sex and the socio-cultural role of sex, gender, can be distinguished but not separated. Therefore, all attempts to obscure reference to the ineliminable sexual difference between man and woman are to be rejected. We cannot separate the masculine and the feminine from God's work of creation, which is prior to all our decisions and experiences, and where biological elements exist which are impossible to ignore. Only by acknowledging and accepting this difference in reciprocity can each person fully discover themselves, their dignity and their identity. In 2019, the Congregation for Catholic Education released the document Male and Female, He Created Them. And we've got this quote from the Catholic Herald. Catholic schools must help parents teach young people that biological sex and gender are naturally fixed at birth and part of God's plan for creation. The Congregation for Catholic Education has seen fit to offer this text to all who have a special interest in education and to those whose work is touched by the question of gender theory. It is intended for the educational community involved in Catholic schools and for all who, animated by the Christian vision of life, work in other types of schools. The document is offered for use by parents, students, school leaders and personnel, bishops, priests, religious, ecclesial movements, associations of the lay faithful, and other relevant bodies. Introduction, and I quote, "It is becoming increasingly clear that we are now facing with what might accurately be called an educational crisis, especially in the field of affectivity and sexuality. In many places, curricula are being planned and implemented which allegedly convey a neutral conception of the person and of life, yet in fact reflect an anthropology opposed to faith and to right reason. The disorientation regarding anthropology, which is a widespread feature of our cultural landscape, has undoubtedly helped to destabilize the family as an institution, bringing with it a tendency to cancel out the differences between men and women, presenting them instead as merely the product of historical and cultural conditioning. The context in which the mission of education is carried out is characterized by challenges emerging from varying forms of an ideology that is given the general name gender theory, which denies the difference and reciprocity in nature of a man and a woman, and envisages a society without sexual differences, thereby eliminating the anthropological basis of the family. This ideology leads to educational programs and legislative enactments that promote a personal identity and emotional intimacy radically separated from the biological difference between male and female. Consequently, human identity becomes the choice of the individual, one which can also change over time. The Christian vision of anthropology sees sexuality as a fundamental component of one's personhood. Man and woman in their created state, as complementary versions of what it means to be human, are disputed. But if there is no preordained duality of man and woman in creation, then neither is the family any longer a reality established by creation. Likewise, the child has lost the place he had occupied hitherto, and the dignity pertaining to him. It is necessary to help students to develop a critical sense in dealing with the onslaught of new ideas and suggestions, the flood of pornography, and the overload of stimuli that can deform sexuality. Catholic educators need to be sufficiently prepared regarding the intricacies of the various questions that gender theory brings up, and be fully informed about both current and proposed legislation in their respective jurisdictions, aided by persons who are qualified in this area, in a way that is balanced and dialogue-oriented. A link to the document Dignitas Infinita and the male and female he created them are included in the description, and it is advised that you would read these documents in full. Finally, I want to end with a reference to the Catholic Code of Canon Law, again a link to which will be in the description. The important section I'm going to read out here, and I quote, "The instruction and education in a Catholic school must be grounded in principles of Catholic doctrine. Teachers are to be outstanding in correct doctrine and integrity of life. Parents are advised to bring to the attention of the school boards, school principals and teachers all of the documents that we have referenced below in the description, and to insist that this aspect of Catholic canon law is abided by." Again, we would advise that you actually read all of the sections in canon law pertaining to Catholic education to get a full understanding of the responsibilities for both parents and educators. While Pope Francis doesn't explicitly refer to where the pressure to include gender ideology in the school curriculum is coming from, we can confirm it is coming from the United Nations and UNESCO, whose definition of the term gender correlates with what the late Pope Francis and the Catholic teachings referenced in this video and would be at odds with. The WHO and UNESCO sexuality education guidelines include this definition, and hence it has found its way into the school curriculum of most Western countries and beyond. We will include the related WHO and UNESCO links in the video description so that you might confirm this for yourself. To finish, we're going to play a short clip of a video interview with Bishop Athanasius Schneider of Kazakhstan on the topic of gender ideology. A link to the full video is also included in the video description.
And then the communists promoted the atheistic materialistic ideology from the kindergarten, from the small one, up to the university. It was always there. And we have the same scenario in our day in almost all Western Europe countries and Latin America countries, that from the kindergarten, they are already pushing the gender ideology very clearly. And so you see, these are for me, we have a new, I call this neo-Marxist, neo-communist gender ideology dictatorship in the Western countries. We must protest against these. We must unmask these as dictatorial, as totalitarian, and to unite all the people of good will and common sense to make alliance, even political, against the new dictatorship, neo-Marxist gender ideology dictatorship in the Western countries, to save human being, to save family.
Yeah. It's been such an immense propaganda effort in the West, and it's interesting. You mentioned how neo-Marxist it is, neo-communist. I've even heard Catholic scholars who even call it neo-Gnostic because of the dualism that Gnosticism presents between body and soul and body and spirit, and how transgenderism is a newer manifestation of such a heresy.
Yes, this is, of course, neo-Gnosticism. It's a very good observation you gave. And the Gnostics, 2000 years ago, one of the pillars was also the so-called androgenism. It means a being which is where there is no difference between the sexes, but you have to overcome the difference of the sexes, they said, the Gnostics, and create a new being which is in the same time male and female, androgenic. So, and this is pure gender ideology which we have today. This is neo-Gnosticism also.
We would ask that you would hit a like, leave a comment, and please share this video as broadly as possible, as the mainstream media have chosen not to share the contents of this video with the public. God bless, and thank you for watching.